Hello, and welcome to the Postpartum Years podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ellen Kramp. I'm a physical therapist and a pelvic health specialist. And today I am getting stories from women who have had different issues with either pregnancy, birth, postpartum, all of it, any aspects there are. And today joining me is Rachel Kaufman. So thank you for joining me, Rachel.
Hi, Mary Ellen. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rachel. So let's start. Did you have any issues with the pregnancy?
I did not have any issues with the pregnancy.
Okay,
All the issues
so
started day of delivery. Well, about a week before, and then day of delivery.
so tell me what happened there.
So had a normal pregnancy. I guess the baby was measuring a little bit small, but I'm a petite person, and I had surgery. I had a septum in my uterus that they had to do 2 surgeries
Okay.
to remove, and so avoiding many miscarriages by taking out the septum, which I found it's a whole other story how I found that. I just figured, okay, my uterus, the baby's measuring small, like my uterus is just maybe not the most viable, but it was doing fine. Nobody triggered any alarms. My doctors didn't say anything. Just, oh, the baby's a little bit small. And then I started to notice, I know there's this campaign now, which they didn't have when I was pregnant, but Count the Kicks or something. I heard about this campaign recently, and I had read my books. It was my first baby. And I noticed that I'd say about a week or so before he was born, I noticed that my stomach was getting kind of concave. I had like a cute, baby bump. I was probably, 27 weeks or something. And I got up out of bed once, like I sat up and I could see it sort of collapse. And, hey, it's my first pregnancy. So I'm like, is this normal? This seems a little weird, but you just go about your day. So there were some signs that, something was a little bit off, and I'm very embodied. Like I danced growing up, and I do healing work and body work. So I'm always looking and, observing what's going on in my body. So I just had those, I think, in the back of my mind. And so the morning I woke up and he wasn't kicking. And he usually, when I was resting or at work, he would, so I just went on alert, and I did some suggestions that I had read, like cat cow yoga thing to get the baby moving, drink some orange juice, sugar, wake them up. So I tried those for a bit, and nothing. And so then my spidey sense went off, like the alarms went off, like this is not probably normal. And I had just switched to a new doctor 2 weeks before, because I was trying for a natural birth, and I didn't like the place I was at. They were like, you're definitely not getting a natural birth. So I called him, and he said, how many weeks are you? I mean, how far along are you? And I said 29 weeks, 2 days. And he said, okay, I'll meet you at the hospital. And he's like, don't get worked up. Just, I want to just check out the baby. I said, okay. So I woke up my husband, who was completely confused why I was waking up so early. It was maybe, I don't know, 7 a.m.-ish, and we're not morning people, so he was half asleep. And so we made our way to the hospital. I'll try to summarize. So because he wasn't kicking and I called, they brought me in. It was all very casual. I mean, I remember I was standing in the hallway, and I don't know if I can mention the hospital. Maybe I shouldn't, but I was standing in the hallway, and they didn't have a room ready. And so I just kind of standing there. And I remember these in the maternity wing or wherever I was, and they had to like roll a bed in or something. I just stood there we were there maybe 5-10 minutes waiting for a room. And it was just kind of awkward. And then they put me in the room and sat my husband in the corner, and he was confused. And then they put the monitor on, and just to check out baby's heartbeat. And they had to keep moving me because they couldn't find the heartbeat or something. And then they found it. And then basically it was racing to 150. It was dropping down to 60, and baby's supposed to be like 150, I think. And then it dropped down to 60 and 70. And my doctor said, I think the baby's in distress. We have to take him out. And of course, as someone who knows I'm not ready at 29 weeks, I was like, oh,
No.
hell no. And I'm a little bit of a stubborn person. So I was like, can you get a second opinion on that? Like, I don't want you cutting my baby out. We're not ready. And he did get a second opinion. He was annoyed, but I didn't care. I was like, you're going to do what I tell you, man. And he, I guess, sent the echocardiogram, whatever they call it, for fetal cardiogram to faxed it, I think, to another doctor. And so maybe like 20 minutes went by and the nurses were monitoring it. And as he was still getting a second opinion, they started to put they started to put a mask on me and an IV. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Excuse my French, if I'm allowed to swear here. I was like, what are you doing? Of course, because the context is that I wanted a natural birth, and all of a sudden they're saying I need an emergency C-section. So, she said, this is standard procedure. If you're in the hospital and you're, submitted to the hospital, you have to get an IV. Everybody knows if you're getting an IV, that natural birth is over, goodbye natural birth plan. So, and then he came back, he said, yes, I did fax it to this guy who's an expert. And he said, the baby needs to come out. Like he could die. We have to get him out. And so then I was like, okay, fine. Like, let's do it. And that was, and I was mentioned to you before, I have the whole story. Like, if people want more of the story, I wrote it in a book about women going through traumatic experiences. It's not about a birthing book, but it was, the whole, and I don't need to get into the details in the delivery room, but they took him out. He was 2 pounds, 1 ounce, and he wasn't breathing at first. Like, there was no noise, and he was all bruised because the amniotic fluid was almost drained. And I don't know if our listeners know, but the third trimester, most of the amniotic fluid is baby's pee.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to doing some research on the placenta, which they cut the placenta up into samples and sent it to like Children's Hospital and to like Yale maternal fetal something, and to see what happened. And there was clotting on the maternal side of the placenta. So he wasn't getting enough nutrients, and he was sort of, I call it shrink wrapping. So when I look back, that whole like concavity thing that happened made sense, and he couldn't move. He was like shrink wrapped in there, which is why that was the day he was born, because and the nurses actually afterwards were like crying. It was very intense. They were like, you saved your baby. We had a stillbirth recently. And so for me, it's really important to tell people, like, yes, if your baby's not kicking and you have any spidey sense, what's the harm? Call the doctor. If I had, so I always remember that, because, just these nurses have seen a lot, right? And for them to be crying, like kind of tears of joy or whatever it was, it's crazy. And you're just like, and of course I was like, my husband and I were numb and just like, what is happening here? But so basically, I always, now I tell him, like, I saved you, you owe me. Like, I'm kidding, but and so it was very intense. And then he was in the NICU for 2 months. So, the whole focus, because I know we want to focus on me, of course I had, and I guess this is maybe useful for people too. So the natural birth I wanted, of course, went out the window. When they gave me the epidural, I don't know if they gave me too much or something, but they kept pumping the medicine in for a while, even after he was born. And it was confusing because he went straight to another hospital because they didn't have a NICU that could handle him. And I was there for another day and a half. And my left leg, he was sort of like tucked to my left side, and they cut more on the left side. My left leg was numb for a day. I couldn't move. And then I got itchy from the medicine that I didn't want, from the epidural. And so itchy that they had to give me some sort of shot. Like, I don't know what it was, a cortisol, or I had an allergic reaction to the epidural, and I couldn't move my leg. So then I remember feeling like a beached whale, because they had to come over. The nurses had to roll me over to give me the shot in my butt, in my buttocks. I couldn't move, and it just felt so horrible, right? And then my husband's going to the hospital, and like my family doesn't know where to go, to be with me or to be with the baby. So that happened after the epidural, And then there's this pressure to start to, of course, I had no baby. You're supposed to start breastfeeding. So they brought me in like a pump, and I was trying to figure out how to pump. The whole thing for me psychologically was very, very stressful. And of course, for the rest of my family, but that the physical stuff, right? I've been cut into, and then I'm numb, and then I'm expected to start pumping breast milk because preemies in the NICU really need, if they have their mother's milk, it really helps them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a quick summary of my traumatic birth. Yeah.
And so, what are the longer term effects that you've had with that?
So obviously I had a C-section. I will say it was, and I have to say, I won't say the doctor's name, but the postpartum care I had was horrible. My doctor was really good during. I'm glad I think he helped save my baby, even though he had a busted Achilles tendon and was delivering my baby like on one of those wheelie things with one of his legs.
Mm-hmm.
But he was great in the emergency. But then afterwards, I had to pull out my own stitches in like, my parents' kitchen, like these thick blue stitches, the C-section. I don't know if it would have made the C-section better, but the fallout from having a C-section is stuff that you don't realize for many years because you're of course caring about the baby and you're ignoring your body.
Yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course. Exactly. So recently, the last year or so, I started working with a pelvic PT and she also does craniosacral and she works with sexual health, so she's been working to help me strengthen. And I did a some Pilates classes my mom got me afterwards to kind of help strengthen things. But then it's kind of like, oh, well, all right, here's a little bit for you. And then back to the baby, which is, it's fine. But then, my son's, he'll be 15 in March. So the C-section scars, fairly set in its ways. So she's been working really to help to showed me how to sort of massage it and pull it up because it has tightened, as you probably know, it's tightened things around there. And so she's kind of, working on that, educating me. And then with the pelvic floor, after he was born, I mentioned that I grew up dancing and I was dancing like 2 days before he was born. After that, I didn't dance for a while. And so my core strength that I had kind of, I think, diminished. And then with the C-section, which is obviously like they cut through all the layers, it's pulling at my, so I didn't have anything horrible. And she can sense more than I can how it's, affecting my core. But I've been learning about that a lot recently, which is really cool. And she also is a proponent of, of course, sexual health. And she showed me this tool that you can use to like, kind of, so I'm really tight up in the, you go into the vagina and like, it's really tight and that can cause so many issues. So a lot of women are like that. So she also told me how to do that. And I'll admit, I don't do it a lot. You kind of like, where do I find the time? And like, where do I put the tool and it's not a sex toy, right? It's like a strength.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it. I can't remember the brand. And so I have it in my room and like, I'm supposed to be using it. Same thing with the jaw, and I think they're similar. I've gotten craniosacral, they go into the jaw and I'm tight on certain sides. So what it does, of course, it creates tension in your neck and your shoulders. The same way down there, it's creating tension. And he's like a big proponent of have lots of orgasms. They're good for you. So
Yes, they are.
I'm not complaining about and I worked in maternal and child health for many years and in global health. And I've, I'm not shy about talking about sex and all that. So for me, it was like, okay, what do I need to do? But it took many years because, by the time I started working on my scar, it was probably a 14-year-old scar or 13-ish. And so it's not too late. She's working with my mom as well. My mom's scar is, I won't say how old I am, but my mom's scar is very old. And hers is worse than mine. And and I think the adhesions from working on it have gotten better. Sometimes I feel like I need an expert to tell me, for my PT to check in and be like, oh yeah, this is better. I know that, even before he was born, I was a little bit asymmetrical, and so it can make it worse. So just keeping your body like strong and flowing is a challenge, you know.
Hmm.
But I guess I have more awareness than the average person. So
Yeah, I find that dancers typically are very aware. Dancers, any sort of high level athlete,
yeah,
they are all very, very aware. Particularly dancers, ice skaters, synchronized swimmers, people who have to put their bodies in certain positions
right,
and know where they are in space at all times versus football, yeah, you're running in, not
right,
that I see too many female football players, but you're just kind of barreling through, with softball, whatever, you're just kind of barreling through versus, dancing, you need to know exactly where you're putting any particular part of your body in position from your toes through the top of your head.
yeah,
And those people are very acutely aware of most of the sensations in their bodies
yeah.
to a very different degree than your average bear. So,
Exactly. And I guess like in, writing this chapter in the book and talking to people about this, I just, want to bring more awareness. Like the count the kicks that is legit. I mean, I had just read it in a book, a couple weeks before, and I think the 28 weeks is when you start your third trimester.
mhm.
And I was, about a week into my third trimester, and that's when the amniotic fluid is, if the baby's getting enough nutrients, is pee. It's
Yes.
gross, like it's gross, but hey, we're all swimming in our own pee.
Yeah.
Um, I just think if people understand that, like, especially when third trimester starts, because I had a sonogram at 25 weeks and all the arteries and veins looked good, placenta looked good. So it just started going downhill pretty fast,
Hmm.
and this person who they were crying over in a way, who had a stillbirth at that hospital in the nation's capital a couple of weeks before, potentially wasn't aware of her body as much. And it's not a criticism. It's just, I want people to know that.
Right, right. And sometimes where the placenta is located, some people don't feel nearly as many kicks
Right.
depending on where that placenta is located.
Yeah.
So that can be a factor too. But the fact that you had probably I can't say it, oligohydramnios,
Oh, that's okay.
where you don't have enough fluid
Yeah.
in the uterus. Yes, uterus. You think I would, be able
Yeah.
to come up with that word
Yeah.
easily?
Yeah. And again, as it was my first child and my last, and people are like, why didn't you have another baby? I'm like, do you have an hour or two? Because I will tell you. Plus, I would have been a, high risk pregnancy the next time. They said, well, if you want to have another baby, you're going to have to take blood thinner because I have
Hmm.
clotting mutations. So I
Hmm.
can't do like traditional HRT. Maybe it's unclear. I have a hematologist, it opened up whole new worlds that I didn't think I wanted to enter.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I have
But at least you knew early,
yeah,
so.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask if there were any other issues that you have been dealing with since you had the baby. Anything with um, peeing when you cough, sneeze, laugh, jump? Have you been able to get back to exercise? Is sex going okay? Bowel issues? Anything sort of like that?
Yeah, I think, well, I was definitely, I'm not a constipated person, but after he was born, I think that's kind of normal, but was definitely constipated. And that was, what's the word? Like, disheartening, because you're like, what is happening? And, I had to get the sitz bath where you're supposed to just sit in it. And I ended up getting it, but not using it. I don't know. Maybe. And, the first few days they were wheeling me around in a wheelchair because I really didn't have a lot of strength to get up. So I had to be wheeled into the NICU in this other hospital once they released me for a day or two to see him. That was, I'd say, I guess that maybe that's normal to be wheeled around for a couple of days. I don't know. Maybe not. No. Okay, good. I mean, that's good. But like, yes, that's what happened to me. I was I was wheeled around, and then, I mean, this is like a funny side note, but this C-section scar is pretty low, but it's, most underwear kind of goes, normal underwear is like a little bit above it, but not too
Hmm.
much.
Right.
I had this nurse that I loved in the NICU, and she went around and found me these, like, I call them the granny panties,
Yep.
and they're these disposable underwear. And for weeks I had to wear those so they would go up much higher and not be near the scar. But they didn't provide me with that. There was no, like, we know this is going to be painful. Here's what you can do. And like I said, my doctor just completely abandoned me, and that's I would say just like long term effects. Psychological was what I paid attention to the most, and then learning that from my PT colleague that yes, that I'm tight in there, and probably, and it does affect the whole body is affected with breathing, getting tense breathing, and
Hmm.
so I'm just learning about the connection with everything there. I don't think, I mean, besides those kind of immediate things, I was so focused on him, that honestly, it's like a black hole, right? If you wonder
Hmm.
what did I do this first few months? How did I survive? And well, I will say, so I feel like most things were the fallout from that, and the breastfeeding was really challenging. I don't know if you want me to talk about that, but
Please do.
okay.
Please do.
Like I mentioned, the in the hospital when I was there, barely my leg was starting to come back to life. And he was in the other NICU. I think somebody came in and brought me like a breast pump. I don't even remember who it was. These people come in to help you, and you're in another world. And so
Hmm.
I started to pump, and of course nothing came out at first because I didn't have the baby on my chest. I had no baby, and
Hmm.
that's what people who've had preemies, we understand, and we want other people to understand, is like it's effing weird to you've given birth and you're like, where's my baby? um
Hmm.
so I'm trying to pump. I can't breastfeed because the baby is not there, and he has no suction reflex anyway because his head was like this big. And um so this suction reflex doesn't come till about 34 weeks. So I was pumping and it didn't come out at first, and then like the colostrum came out, and then it was a little like rusty color, and I felt, and then when it finally started coming, took it several days, and I felt bad because like it wasn't enough, and there's all this judgment you put on yourself and then other people, and then it started to flow more. But the first several days, of course, you wonder, is this going to happen? Am I
Hmm.
able to provide milk? Then it started to flow more, but I had to pump every day because even if I was in the NICU, again, he couldn't drink. He couldn't breastfeed. So they have like the separate room. You end up having to leave the NICU and go to the separate room to breastfeed, or you can do it right in the NICU. And they have these ancient like screens that weigh 500 pounds that you have to roll into place to give you privacy. And there's fathers and brothers and stuff in the NICU for other kids. And so it's not like this peaceful, nice place and it's nice to be relaxed when you're breastfeeding, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Instead
sorry,
of lights and
pumping.
noises
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So I started to pump a lot, and then they would give him uh, his first feedings. Well, he had a tube in his, um, it was in his mouth going down his throat, and then they wanted him to start breathing better. So then they put it in his nose. So we didn't even see what his lips looked like for a couple of weeks because he had, tubes in. And then it was like this little syringe of milk. So I started to feel good, like, okay, I'm providing breast milk for him. And, people who can, they can do it for, get a milk bank. So I was like, and then I started to produce so much, enough for a normal sized baby, that I had too much. So then I had to start freezing my milk, and my milk was in my mom's freezer. It was in a neighbor's freezer. It was in my, I still joke, like I had milk in freezers all around the area, and it was bizarre. And so then he started to eat more and more, and eventually, I think maybe around 33, 34 weeks. So it's 4 or 5 weeks after he was born. It wasn't until then that I could start trying to actually breastfeed. But the point is that there was a lot of you don't get to choose. Like I didn't get to choose how my birth was. I didn't get to choose if I wanted to breastfeed because I was obviously forced to pump. And then eventually when he came home and I was breastfeeding, but he didn't latch amazingly. And because he was so small, we had to give him bottles with milk and put like, I think some sort of extra like vitamins or something or whatever they had fortifying the milk with.
Right.
And then there was times where, I think then we had to do, what do you call it? Powdered, what do you call it? Baby formula. We ended up having to get formula because then then the milk wasn't enough. It was very complicated. And then there's still that guilt, that you get from other women or whatever, you should be breastfeeding more. Like I mean,
I'm just going to say, stop
yeah,
that.
I know.
Don't do that to another woman.
My
Just
plan,
don't.
right. No, my plan, my plan was always like, when I have a baby, I'm going to breastfeed. I think it's a nice bonding. And I did have some nice bonding, but I don't think my son ever got like enough from our feedings. And then I would breastfeed and then I'd have to give him the bottle and maybe it was my milk or formula. I can't remember. But eventually, I think when he was 4 months, post birth, my milk dried up after about 4 or 5 months because I was pumping so much. Oh, and in addition to that, my nipples were so sore from pumping that the shape changed and they were really uncomfortable. And then I had to wear these like plastic things over my nipples, over my bra, under my bra because it was so uncomfortable. And my breasts were like rocks. They were so hard. Then we learned that you can, take cabbage and like, hammer the cabbage and put it in your bra because I had rocks. They were like rocks. I don't know if that's normal.
No, it's not. No,
Okay.
it's not.
See, I'm learning that no, I learned that that's not normal. There was a point where they were so uncomfortable. The nipples were itchy and hurting. I didn't get that like the infection, but it's just from the pumping. I mean, it's just
Just a
and,
constant trauma.
right, the constant trauma. And so then my family, I have this funny image of like my husband and my mom standing next to each other, like pounding on cabbage to like soften it, and then you put the cabbage in your bra, and it actually works. It did soften them. So I just felt like I didn't have breasts at one point. They were just rocks on my chest. And again, your body's not your own. So I would say, as you can see, like more of the physical stuff, the emergency stuff was, postpartum. And then so my breast milk dried up and then it was formula and all that stuff. And then I think I had a mammogram like 8 months later after my milk had dried up. And the irony was, they squeeze really hard in the machine and I had milk come out. And I was like, are you kidding me, universe? Like my milk dried up, but then it shoot out during a mammogram. And it was like kind of embarrassing. Like I don't get embarrassed too easily, but I was just frustrated. Like, seriously, I still have milk in there and not for the baby though. And so the cruel irony of the world. I was like, why did that happen? So and again, if someone pumps a lot, maybe this is normal, but my nipples kind of changed the shape permanently. Nothing grotesque, but your body changes, right? I mean, that's one thing you don't think about. So yeah, the breastfeeding was really hard. And yeah, it's nice to talk about it because it's usually about the baby and all this stuff and it's kind of interesting for you to say, no, that's not normal because that was, again, that was my only baby and I don't know. And I would be, I don't know if jealous is the word, but just envious of these women who are like, yes, I breastfeed for a year and everything was great. And I mean, I've heard more hardship stories than easy ones, even like finding the milk and having to go to my mom's friend's house to collect the milk. Definitely makes for interesting stories.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it just women who have a lot of challenges with breastfeeding, it takes a toll mentally on
Yeah.
them as well. I mean, just the pumping, when people talk about, well, it's just pumping. It is not just pumping. It's it's much harder for many women to get milk out with pumping compared to with breastfeeding. I know just in comparison, if I breastfed my kids, Like I was working at the time, if I were to just pump, I could barely get 2 ounces out.
Mm.
But if I breastfed on one side, I could pump an 8 ounce bottle in 10 minutes on the other. So
Wow.
it can be extremely different, pumping versus breastfeeding and pumping while breastfeeding.
Hmm.
And for every woman, that's completely different. And it can be extremely stressful. And the stress itself will lower your milk supply.
Of course.
So between the pain and the stress of what's going, you've got a preemie baby.
Yeah.
So you're stressed about that. You're stressed about trying to produce enough milk to feed that baby. You're stressed about, it's hurting you as you're doing this sometimes. And, unless you have the right type of pump, the right type of flange, the right settings on the pump,
Hmm.
and are you even anatomically designed to fit all of that? Um,
Yeah.
so there are all those factors too, and that plays quite the mental toll on you as you're going through all that. Plus, you had this major trauma as far as
Hmm.
that pregnancy did not go as to plan. That delivery certainly went nowhere near
Yeah.
plan. Postpartum, yeah, that was not your plan
No,
either. So,
nothing was the plan.
yeah, combine all of that. Your body wasn't completely 100% ready to go straight into breastfeeding at that
Yeah.
point in time. And, you throw in somebody who's at 40 weeks and they end up with a C-section and just that sudden onset, especially if they haven't been in labor, you're suddenly just thrown into an OR, that baby's ripped out of your body. You haven't had those hormone shifts yet
Right.
to prepare your breast for that. So things are kind of having to wake up. You're dependent on these sudden changes in your body. Is like, wait, what? Huh? What do
Yeah.
I do now?
Yeah. You didn't go through the birth canal, so there's all these things that are supposed to be beneficial for the baby that
Right.
they don't get, and then and maybe it's beneficial. I don't know. My cervix never dilated, so I mean, I'll just throw in that years later I got an IUD because I couldn't take birth control because of my clotting issue. You can't take
Right.
regular birth control. So I got a Mirena IUD and I wasn't prepared. And now since then, a lot of stories have come out about how horrible insertion and taking out is. Like no one was really talking about it, but because my cervix had never dilated, it was like I never had a baby. I didn't go into labor. So when she put the physician's assistant put the IUD in, I almost passed out and had to call my mom for her to pick me up. And it was horrendous. And there's been a lot of stories about that too. So I think that's even, if we think about it, if I think about it, that's part of the fallout of not having him go through the birth canal is my cervix never dilated. Sure, women are getting the IUDs now without having given birth, but I think the ideal is you've had like a kid or two and the cervix has opened, and so when they insert the IUD through your cervix, it's supposed to open. And on top of that, I have a tilted cervix, so that's fun. Um,
Hmm.
the woman had
Yeah,
no
that's going to
idea.
be a
Yeah,
problem as well.
she had no idea what she was doing, and so a cervix that had never dilated, a tilted cervix. It was just, and I wasn't prepared. Like I said, I drove myself there and had to leave my car in the parking lot because I couldn't drive home. I was like white and past. If I think about it, that's ties into the changes or not changes that your body has gone through.
Well, yeah, between that, you also had two surgeries for the septum that you had.
Yes.
And I assume that was vaginally that those were done.
Yeah. The first one was unsuccessful and she was a specialist. And then I ended up in a study at the NIH because there was a doctor there that knew what to do. So then I was in the study for abnormal uterus. And so it was free and all the care was free. So that was kind of interesting to be in an NIH study for my uterus. And that's how I found out I was pregnant because he did the surgery or the fellow did. I don't honestly know who did the surgery on me. He was there. Like the music, leading the orchestra, and they said NIH's policies, before, which makes sense, before they were going to do a saline rinse of my uterus to check and see how the scarring went, how it was looking. And I had been there several times, and I didn't get a pregnancy test once because I just didn't. And then they were like, no, before we, look at your uterus, you got to get a pregnancy test. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And I got one, and then found out I was pregnant. And so they never did the saline rinse. My son is one lucky kid. Like, he could have been removed at that point. So that was immediately preceding me finding out I was pregnant. So it was very chaotic. And so, yes, I think I have scarring in my uterus. I know it's a weird shape. God knows what's happening in there. So definitely no thanks. No thanks to kid number 2, because I don't know what it looks like in there. I don't have the septum anymore, but I think he's lucky to be here because of all the stuff surrounding my body physically. I have one kidney, which I found out, a couple of years before I was pregnant. So yeah, it was this, I'm going backwards now, but it was this whole sequence of events for several years. I was finding out about my body. And now in the present moment, working on realizing, okay, I need to work on my scar and strengthen my pelvic floor. Now I'm just kind of enjoying my PT sessions, and they're very relaxing.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, with the cervix, with the uterus, there's not all pelvic PTs work directly on the cervix or work directly on the uterus. Some focus much more on muscle and strengthening and stuff. But some of us really spend a lot of time on the cervix, and we spend a lot of time on the uterus as well, and to mobilize all that, because that plays into back pain as well and what the pelvic floor is doing. But that can make it, in some cases, we can make it much more comfortable for something like an IUD insertion. Some of us work with women like before IVF,
Mm-hmm.
before the mock transfer, to make sure that that sort of thing is going to be going as well as it can. So there are a lot of things that we can do on that end to make an IUD insertion more comfortable, to make IVF more comfortable, to make
Yeah.
sex more comfortable. Because for some women, the cervix is not mobile. And so they have a lot of pain with deep
Mhm.
penetration or certain positions. And so mobilizing that can make a lot of difference for some people.
Yeah, there's a lot that can go wrong, and that can be fixed, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, when you're discharged from the hospital, it's all about the baby, and even then, they don't give you a lot of information. But there's certainly no manual or a person at the hospital telling you, like, you should go see a pelvic therapist. But I think where I'm going is that every woman needs to have some sort of care postpartum, whether it's right away or in a couple of years. Like, go to a pelvic PT. I don't know anyone who doesn't have like something that needs. It takes a village. We need support.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I was talking to a therapist this weekend, and she was from Belgium. And she said in Belgium, women get 15 pelvic PT appointments before they give birth and 15 afterwards. And
oh
I'm like,
God.
I've spent 20 years trying to get OBs to like send people.
Wow.
And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
They definitely do things better in Europe. I mean, the amount of time off that women get in, especially like in Scandinavia, Nordic countries, they get like a year off for each baby. And I think that not having maternity leave, not sufficient maternity leave, and definitely not sufficient paternity leave, stress. We were talking about stress affects everything. So, of course, you're going to be stressed if you have to go back to work, and your baby's still breastfeeding and all this stuff. So it plays into it, and then you're gonna tighten up, and then of course most women don't want to have sex after they've given birth for a while, and then there's like the relations with your partner, and it's a whole thing. So I think if we talk about it, and I do mentoring for preemie moms through an organization, and it's nice. They match me like once every 2 years, and I have a woman right now, and it's really nice to be able to talk to her and say, this is my experience. And if someone says this to you, I would question it because this is my experience. And it has been really helpful in her. So that I think the more we
Good.
talk about it, her son
Hmm.
29 weeks. So they matched us, just saying like, this is my experience. Okay, this is not normal. And that's okay. It's not normal, but this is what I did. Or, people were like, oh, go work out. Once you're good, you can start working out. And I was like, I can't work out. I can't wear a bra right now.
Hmm.
My nipples are killing me. And of course I gained weight, and then the IUD made me gain more weight. So there's definitely weight gain has been very frustrating, but perimenopause, that's a whole other discussion. That is with weight gaining until I hit perimenopause. And I was like, okay, no, there's more. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely its own thing. All right. So, is there anything else you want to add?
I mean, I think I've shared a lot, hopefully helpful for people. Count the kicks, take care of yourself. Your baby needs you to take care of yourself. Your child needs you to take care of yourself. I'm still taking care of myself. I'm just getting back into dancing more recently. And,
Good.
you have to be a good role model for your child. My son's like, you're going out dancing? And I'm like, yep. He's happy when I leave the house now. He's like, oh, goodbye. I think when they see us being happy and doing what we like, and if I'm dancing and I'm feeling more in my body again, like I used to be, and it's helping me tone a little bit more, and I'm going to feel good about myself, and it's probably helping my pelvic floor too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The book you were talking about that you have your story in, is that one that you wrote, or is that one that you just have your story in?
So it's a compilation book, her badass stories, and I think they're on like maybe the fourth or fifth one already. And so I'm one of many authors. Here's me. It's basically about courageous women who unapologetically became the badasses in their own lives. So, I was a badass. I saved my son from death. I mean, that's like
Hmm.
just that one sentence is crazy. So yeah, I just decided like I had to tell the story, and this was a good book to do it in to tell my story. And then I, give some tips at the end of how to listen to your intuition, because I'm a intuitive healer, and so embodied and also listening to intuition. And when people ignore that, things can happen. Yeah, that's my final say is like, your gut, listen to your body. It's important. Yeah.
It is. It is very much so.
So yeah, this is on Amazon, and if people are inspired by the stories, there's many other wonderful stories in here. Again, it's nice to know that other people have gone through something, and see
Hmm.
yourself in that, and feel like, oh, I'm not alone here. I know I'm not the only one who went through this.
Well, thank you very much for your stories.
Thank
We appreciate you sharing everything. I hope that helps any of you out there. And if you are interested, please give info or feedback in the comments. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.